Welcome to Design Diary, the podcast where you get to look inside my board game design notebook as well as what's going on inside my head. We look at a new word each day from the sense of mechanics, tone, theme, or inspiration for a full game. Today's word is
Irrupt, not to be confused with erupt. It's IRRUPT. The definition is to rush in forcibly or violently, which is kind of the opposite of erupt. Another definition of a natural population to undergo a sudden upsurge in numbers, especially when natural ecological balances and checks are disturbed. And the third one is to become active or violent, especially suddenly, which is erupt. So it's sort of kind of, I read that they existed side by side since the former, Irrupt and erupt existed side by side since the former entered the English language in the 1800s. Both had Latin roots that meant to break, but eventually irrupt was to rush in and erupt was to burst out. But sometimes they kind of cross streams there once in a while. So I'm gonna read what I wrote down. I read that I just want to see an example of erupting for the ecological balances, and it said, in the absence of predators, the island's rodent population increased rapidly, which is perfect. So nothing was causing them to, stay or die down, and instead they would populate. So I had this instant idea on this that was kind of mixing everything, and it sort of came from an area control side. Area control is like my favorite. It's usually like my favorite kind of games to play. Games like Cry Havoc and stuff like that. But I also like to design them. I have at least Blood Royals as an area control and a lot of others that I work on. So it's something that I get a lot of fun out of and enjoyment. So I took a really weird spin with this where you were pouring, and I can't pin the idea of how this works, but you're pouring out of a bag or even like a cup or a pitcher, like bits onto a map. And enough that it's causing the bits that are on the map to disperse. And the shape of those bits to make them move once they're on the map and other things are coming in. They have to have some sort of rounded bottoms or some. I don't know. It's a very hard thing to kind of nail, and would just take starting to pour things out and testing it. I also thought maybe a dice tower could push them all out onto there, but something that has this forceful action. And when I thought of a dice tower, it also made me think of the dice tower and how they their component drops at the beginning of their review videos. But something with a forcible wave of components coming down on top of existing ones and pushing them past the borders on this map. So whatever the method, I wanted to see the bits land on the map and try to fit their way into a location. The location should overflow with the bits based on whatever their shapes are, but it should overflow beyond the border of the map. Maybe not the first time, but after multiple times. And the key to this from a component production side is making sure that when I pour them, they don't just sit on top, they wedge their ways in between and push sideways. I don't know how important that is, but to me, with this initial concept, it seemed that. I have all bits that are touching an outside location. So let's imagine, and this is an interesting dexterity issue and this is sort of dexterity. It's definitely dexterity, but not traditional dexterity. But an issue that I've seen from time to time, it's that when you cover something, and then you have to evaluate to see which of the pieces is crossing the border. So imagine there's enough bits that you really can't see the border of the map. How do you know which ones are in and which ones are out? And I was using that as some sort of gauge for getting points or losing points, which ones are in or out. So sort of instead of looking for the border, you look for anything that's touching the outside. So let's say each each area on the map is a different color. There's a red one, there's a yellow one. If there's enough pieces that you can't see what's touching, you can see what's the red one, which is our destination, like the map, the section of the map that's in question. You would look at the yellow one on the outside, and any of the bits that are touching the yellow one, remove them. So it doesn't matter if they're touching the yellow for a millimeter or more than that. If they're touching the yellow, they're removed. And then you do that until there's nothing else touching the yellow and everything else is inside of the red. So that was a little technical thing that I kind of got hung up on for a second. And with other dexterity games, I got hung up with it a lot, just trying to figure out, you've got a card throwing game, cards are covering other cards, but when you've got 5 cards out there, which one's covering which, and you sort of have to invert it and look at what isn't being covered and sort of work from there. But let's say all those pieces that are touching the yellow area are taken off the map, and now you've got just the ones touching the red. You can do something with the ones that were touching the yellow area, like that could be good or bad. They could score, they could lose points. It depends on whether you want to get out of the area or if you want to remain and populate and grow in there. So they're removed and something happens. And then we look at the ones that remain. Now the ones that remain are going to be in multiple tiers. And this is where we go back to this weird component thing, because you want to be able to see which ones are touching the ground. And I didn't explain that best early on, and I don't know if it would evolve away from that. But the idea was the ones that are touching the ground are the ones in there. The ones that are up above the ground are no good, maybe removed, but touching things makes other things fall in this kind of game. So it's another complication with whatever the component is. But an easy way is to just leave them all there, have them all remain, and points are gained or lost when they go outside of the area. So I think of it like those coin machines in the arcades where you're knocking your coins down and trying to hope that the coins go over the edge, and then all the coins that go over the edge, you get tokens or whatever. Also a little bit like Potion Explosion. It sort of has something like that where all the marbles end up in the top of the box, and then they start to like wedge their way out a little bit, but not exactly. But this whole thing is just absolute chaos, unless there is some control in seeding this bucket or cup that's pouring onto it. There's also a little bit of control on choosing where to pour it, how it's being poured, slowly or fast, and who's pouring it. There's a little bit of control on each of those, especially if there's multiple piles and multiple locations and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, that's as far as I got with it. Rush in forcibly made me think of pouring. It definitely made me think of that violently as well, with just bits just clashing upon each other and just pushing each other out of this little map section. The sudden upsurge in numbers when natural ecological balances are disturbed is not quite tied to pouring a bunch of bits onto something. I'd like to explore that in a way, just definitely a more natural way where something happens and then you reevaluate or just at the end of each turn or phase or something, you're reevaluating the game state, and then just your numbers are going to go up based off of that. They shouldn't go down. The game state and other players and things should bring numbers down, but the evaluation to bring things up would be a neat way to introduce Irrupt into a game. So there it is. If you have anything, please share. YouTube, Twitter, wherever. We're here. So thanks, and enjoy your day. I'll see you tomorrow.